Hello and welcome to this live workshop on turning a Figma mockup into a web page. And this is completely unscripted. I'm going to pick up a design and I'm going to implement from scratch something that I've not practiced before. So you will see me making a lot of mistakes. You will see things go wrong, but I hope to show to you what happens when you are going through the process of turning a design into a proper web page. What are the challenges you encounter and how can you answer or overcome some of those challenges? So with that, let's get started. Today, we are going to pick up a mockup from Figma. By the way, Figma is a design tool. So at most companies, you will find designers, specifically UI or user interface designers, use a tool like Figma to create mockups of web pages. And then as a web developer, you will have to turn those mockups into proper HTML, CSS, or sometimes you might use a framework like React, etc. And if not Figma, sometimes people use a tool called Sketch. Sometimes they use some other tools, but every design tool more or less looks similar. And let us open up this mockup. So typically as a developer, you will receive a read-only copy of the mockup and you are going to be able to then inspect specific areas within that mockup. So looks like this is the web page that we've picked out. By the way, I've picked this out from the Figma community, which is where a lot of such free web pages can also be found in case you want to practice. And this is what we'll try and create today. So we have this web page where this is created by Ferdi Sahin, and looks like we have their phone number, email, and we have a picture. Not sure if it's a stock picture or if it's a picture of the person who created the design. Then there is this is often called the hero section. This is often called the section where you have some big text and maybe a call to action or a button. In this case, that button seems to be contact me. Then there is this section called what I do, talking about his developer and designer experience. So this looks to be a personal website, and there is some information about front-end development, back-end development, interface development that he's talking about here. Then there is information about some of his projects. Now, of course, most designers will just put in some random text or lorem ipsum text, as this is called. Most designers will put in a lorem ipsum or a placeholder text. But of course, in the real world, when this website goes live, some actual text can come in here. Okay, so this will be information about the projects created by Ferdi. And then there is also this footer at the bottom. All right. There's actually a more, let me just sign up here so that we can actually see this. And I'll be able to inspect specific parts of this web page. I'll be able to look at the fonts, colors, and things like that. And in fact, I am going to pick a slightly harder version of this. So this is what is given as an assignment in one of the courses that we are running. This is in fact the first assignment on HTML and CSS, but I'm going to pick a slightly harder version of this. So let me just find that. So I'm going to use this extended design mockup, something that is actually a little bit harder. So here now we have not just the same hero section, but we also have this in this skills and project section as before, but we also have this section called pricing, which seems to have like a pricing, a bunch of pricing elements sharing information about various services. And we also have this section about frequently asked questions. So what we'll do is we'll try and cover some of these more advanced design elements as well. And maybe we'll also try and add some of these background elements. So there seems to be this background element over here. There seems to be this background element here. And there seems to be this line over here that shows up just below WordPress developer. So we'll see how much of this we can cover. I have no clue if we'll be able to touch on all of this within the hour or so that we have. But whenever you're given us a design mockup, this is where you should start. You should start by just studying the page and understanding what's on it, identifying the various sections within the page. And I've actually laid out a step-by-step process that we will try and follow today, very, very roughly. But the prerequisites that I'm assuming here are HTML. So I'm assuming here that you have some knowledge of HTML. I am assuming here you have some knowledge of CSS. And I'm assuming here you know how to use a code editor like Visual Studio Code. If you don't, then you should check out some beginner-friendly tutorial or come join our full stack developer bootcamp where we cover all of these in a lot of detail. Okay, so the first thing is to inspect the design mockup. Now, of course, we've opened up the link and we have created an account on Figma. So we can actually inspect the mockup. And once you've created an account, you can go into this inspect tab on the right. So if I just, let me just zoom in here a little bit so that you can see things a little better. So on Figma, you have this inspect tab. And this inspect tab gives you a lot of very powerful details that you can directly translate into things like CSS properties, colors, fonts, etc. So let's say I want to check what exactly is the background color here, or maybe the background color for the entire design. You can see here that the background color for this entire design seems to be over here FFF8F0. All right, so that is how I can pick out the background color. And seems like this particular design was created with a width of 1440 pixels and a height of 3596 pixels. So 1440p is a common width setting that people use. So we're going to use that same width setting. And I can go into individual sections. So I can go into this particular section here. And here I can see, okay, this is the width, height, etc. This is the actual text in case I want to copy it, the content. This is the typography. So it seems like the font used is League Spartan, and then there is a certain font weight, there is a certain font size. So all of this information is going to be useful when you start putting in some of the CSS for our page. And there's a bunch of information about the CSS as well that we'll try and use later. Okay. So first thing you should do is just inspect a few things and figure things out, understand the dimensions and styles of various components, and identify the fonts used on the page so that we can find them on Google Fonts. So for example, the font used here on this page is called League Spartan. You can see here. So I can just come into Google Fonts and I can search League Spartan. And here is that font, right? So most fonts that designers use will be picked from Google, will be available on Google Fonts. So you will have to then include those fonts within your web page to actually start using them. Okay. You might also want to export the images as PNG or JPEG files. So here, for example, in this mockup, we have this image, and this image may need to be exported. So you can just go to the export tab and you can just press plus and you can export this image. So let me just export this image as, let's see, let me just call it hero image. So since this is part of the hero section, the top section is often called the hero section. I'm just going to put it on my desktop and call it hero image, right? And similarly, if there were other images on the page, you could also export those images. We don't have to do it immediately. We can do it slightly later as well. All right, so that would be step one, inspecting things. But let's now start coding. So step two is to set up the basic page structure and styles. And then step three is to actually go ahead and implement the web page section by section. So first, I'm just going to create a folder on my desktop and open it up in Visual Studio Code. I'm not going to use Git or anything here. I'm just simply going to, let me create a new folder. And let me call it, let me give it a name, Figma 2 web page. And in this folder, I am also going to move in my hero image that I just downloaded. And I just want to open up this folder in Visual Studio Code. So let me just open up Visual Studio Code. This is the code editor that is often used by web developers. And on Visual Studio Code, I'm just going to go to File, Open Folder. And I'm going to navigate to the folder on my desktop, Figma to Web Page. So here I'm selecting the folder Figma to Web Page. And I'm going to click Open. All right. So now we have this folder, Figma to Web Page over here. And in this folder has been opened up in Visual Studio Code. And now I can start developing. So I can create a new file and I can call this file index.html. And this is going to be my HTML file, which is going to contain all of the HTML code. And I'll add a CSS file later on as well. And you can see that the same file got added here too. And let us put some very basic content into this file, index.html. Let us just put the HTML tag. Again, I'm assuming here you have some knowledge of HTML, but in case you don't, take a very basic tutorial should be sufficient to follow along with what we're doing here. Now within the HTML tag, we generally have a head tag and a body tag. The head tag is where we are going to put all the links like CSS, JavaScript, fonts, etc. And we also put a title here. So let's give this a title. This is the personal website for Ferdi Sahin. So F-E-R-D-I-S-A-H-I-N. So let's just put F-E-R-D-I-S-A-H-I-N, Ferdi Sahin. And let us, in the body, let us just create a div and let us just put hello world here in the div. Okay. So I've done nothing here, nothing so far. I've just created a folder. In that folder, I've created an index.html file, and that index.html file now has some HTML content, very basic stuff. And now I can open up this index.html file in a browser. So I can just double click, and here you can see that the file has been opened up in a browser. over here if I zoom in a little bit. And now we are ready to get started. So let me just put this on the side, and I'm going to close this sidebar for now as well. So now we have done the first thing. We've created a folder on our desktop, opened it up in VS Code. We are ready to go. Then we are going to create an index.html file, and we are also going to create a styles.css file. That is something that we will also need to add, where we are going to add all our CSS, and we'll have copied over the image that we were using. Here there's just one image. So let me create another file called styles.css. All right, perfect. I've created a file styles.css. This is where my text or my CSS is going to go. And now I need to incorporate the styles.css file. I need to link this file from index.html into my, so that I can use the styles from this page. All right. And I'm just going to search. So how to link CSS file in HTML page. I should be knowing this, but I keep forgetting this. So I just look it up. So HTML styles CSS, how to add CSS. All right. And there are three ways to add CSS. We want to add the external CSS file. So the external CSS file is we simply do this: link rel equal to style sheet and href equals mystyle.css. So I'm just going to add that link, rel equal to style sheet. Of course, in this case, it's not mystyle.css, it is styles.css. That is the CSS file that we are using. And there seems to be this doc type HTML that is there here. So let me just put in this HTML here as well. Okay. All right. So now we have set up the the HTML file. We have set up the styles.css file, and we can verify that things have been set up by, let's say, going into the CSS file and adding some styles. Let's say, let's add a background color, antique white, and let's save it. Let's reload the page, and you can see that the color of the page, the background color, has changed. All right. So I'll just reset that for now and get back to where we were. Perfect. So now the next thing for us to do is to add the head title, which we've done already, the link tag for the style and the body, and maybe add section wise divs. So we have a bunch of sections here. Let me come back here into the design. So I'll call this the hero section. And you can see here, even the designer has called it the hero section. So this is the hero section. Then under the hero section, we have this what I do section. And under the what I do section, we have this project section. And under the project section, we have this pricing section and the questions section. All right. So let's just create a bunch of divs. So we have a top level div called hero. Then let's create another div called what I do. And then let us create another div called projects. Then let us create another div called pricing. Let us create another div called questions, and let us create another div called footer. There's also that black footer at the end. So I am going to have another thing for that as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we have 6 sections, and let's reload that. And this is what we're hoping is going to eventually turn into the actual web design, the page that we are looking at. Okay. Perfect. So now we've created these sections. What next? Set up the basic styles, header, body, font family, text size, etc. So let's start setting up some of the basic styles here. Okay. First thing first is the background of the entire page. So I'm just going to go and select the entire, this is called a frame in Figma. So I can just click on the frame name and get the frame, and looks like this is the color that is being used here. So I'm going to go in here and I am going to come into styles.css, and for the body, I am going to set background color to this color. Oh, okay. I think I didn't need to type. Yeah. So background is this color. And now we've added the background. So we're starting to make progress. We've added the background. Step 1 is done. What next? Well, I might need to just study the fonts that are used on the page and include those fonts from Google Fonts into my project. So here is one font. There is this font called League Spartan that seems to be used here. So League Spartan. Okay, I want to use the League Spartan font, and I found it on Google Fonts. So let me just, seems like I have some selections here already. Let me get rid of all these selections so that I can go ahead and do this from scratch. So League Spartan is the font I want to use, and let's see, let's get all the weights, and we will get rid of some of the additional weights. So Google Fonts is a place where you can find all kinds of fonts, and to incorporate a font into your website, you can just add a bunch of styles of the font. So you can see that there are various font weights. There's a thin font, there's a thick font, regular font and all. So I'm just grabbing all of these so that I might need to use any of them. I'm not sure. I'm grabbing all, but later on I can go in and edit the link tag or whatever I incorporate so that I don't have to worry about including additional fonts that I'm not using. But just to give you an idea, what you're going to get here is, let's say I close this. So once you add a bunch of fonts, you can see this view selected families button on the top right. And from there, you can check, you can review that, okay, for League Spartan, you have selected a bunch of these fonts. And then to use that font on your website, you can then use a link tag. So to use the link tag, you simply copy all of these and then you go and add that within the head tag of your HTML page. But of course, League Spartan is not the only font. There are other fonts here as well. So let me go and check what other fonts are being used so that I can just incorporate all of them into my website at once. Okay, now this font over here seems to be Poppins. So Poppins seems to be a font that is used here, and there is this font Inter that seems to be used here as well. This seems to be Poppins, this seems to be League Spartan, this seems to be Poppins, this seems to be Inter, and Poppins. Okay, so from what I'm gathering here, there seem to be three fonts here. One is the font that is used for very big, large headings. Then second is the font that is being used for these smaller headings or section headings or big text. And then third is the body text, the actual body text, and that seems to be Inter. So let me grab Poppins and let me grab Inter, and then we'll add all these fonts into our web page. So let me search for the font Poppins. So let's go back to Google Fonts. Let's go Poppins. Okay, that is the Poppins font. I am just going to select all the variations right now. Probably not the best idea. I should probably check with the designer which all we need to use, but it's okay. We'll go and fix this later. Okay, I have selected a bunch of these fonts. All right, looks like there's a lot of these. So I've added the Poppins font. Let me go back in, let me search for the Inter font, and I'm going to get a bunch of variations of the Inter font as well. Again, I'll just select all of them just so that we don't have to worry about missing any important fonts. Looks like we got the Inter font as well. Okay, great. So now you can see that our link tag has been populated over here. So we have this link, rel, pre-connect, etc., etc. And over here, this is the specific area where we have names of fonts. I can zoom in a little bit. You can see that we have names of fonts and then weights of those fonts as well. So let's just copy that entire link tag and let's go in and put that link tag into our head. So I'm just pasting the link tag here and I'll just right click, select format document so that it just shows up a little nicely. And now we have incorporated all the fonts into our page 2. Of course, we've not started using them. We've just incorporated them. So no change happens on the page itself, but let's come back here into the page and let's see. So we have, it looks like Inter is the main body font. So I'm just going to come in here into styles.css and into the body, I'm going to add font family Inter. Actually, I can just copy this from, I can just copy this from Figma itself. I can just click the copy button and that's going to copy all of these things. So font family Inter, the base font size, I'm going to just set it on HTML just so that we can use EMs for relative font sizes. Font weight of 400 on Inter. Okay. Then the font line height seems to be 24 pixels. Letter spacing, we probably don't need that. It's by default, I believe it's just 0. And then text align left, we don't need that. Okay. So just as I do that, I've changed the body fonts and you can already start to see that now we are getting something that is closer to what we expect. Okay. What about the color of the body text? So the body text seems to have this slightly different color, and this is the color that they're using here. So the color of the body text is 55206D. So I'm going to come in here and set the body color, body text color. Let's come back here. Let's see. Body text color. Yeah, it's all added here. So over here we have this color 55206D. So this is a nice thing about Figma. It gives you the CSS properties that you can use directly. Of course, Sometimes the CSS properties may not have an exact mapping. You may still have to modify things a little bit depending on how the designer has set things up. But in most cases, you should probably just be able to copy things over. And now you can see that the color of the text has also changed. Great, that's fine. What next? What next? Well, let us set up maybe, so this is like a heading. This is an H1. There's an H1 tag. So for all the headings, H1 to H6, I feel like, or maybe at least this is an H1 and then this is an H2. And looks like H1 and H2 are the only headings used. And then this is an H3, which also seems to have the font pop-ins. So for H1 and H2, seems like we're using League Spartan. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to say H1, comma H2. I want to use the font family League Spartan. So let's see, font family League Spartan. So I can just copy that over here, or I can just copy all the typography at once. So let me copy the typography here for the entire thing. And let me come in here and let me paste it. Of course, sometimes we may have to edit what we paste. So H1, H2, let me just put font weight 700. I'll verify if this is correct. Actually, let's just do H1 for now. We'll do H2 later. Okay, let's format this document. And all right, so now for H1, which is the heading of the page, we have set up the font family. We don't need the letter spacing and text align. I think that should be fine. We've set up the font weight. We've set up the line height. So I can come back in here and then maybe I can actually just put in this text directly. So again, I can click on this text. I can scroll down or scroll up and copy that actual content. So just go into the content tab and click copy. Come back here and maybe in the hero section, let us just put in an H1 here. So let's do hero section and let us just put in H1 and let's paste this. Okay. All right. And I was just using a very big font earlier. That's why a zoomed in version. That's why it was so big. But now that we have this H1 in a big size, I'm zooming back to 100% visibility. Okay. All right. So now we have the H1, but the color seems to be off. Like you see here, the color for this H1 seems to be different. So let's grab the color. The color is shown here. So let's just grab this color 190D37 and let us grab this color and let us just go in here and let us set color to 190D37. And now we have the right color for the H1 as well. Okay. Great. Let's also fix the H2. Let's fix this style as well. So I'm just adding in the basic styles. We added the body text background. We added the body font size. We added the body font family. Let's add the font family for H2. So with H2, seems like we are still using League Spartan. And how did I decide this is an H2? I'm just going by my gut feeling here. The biggest heading on the page should be an H1. The second level heading should be H2s, and then maybe these can be H3s. So we'll see. But for H2 here, I'm just going to grab the typography settings and I'm going to create another H2 style. And I'm going to again give it the right styles. Let's get rid of letter spacing, text align. We don't need that. And let's just verify that an H2 is loading fine as well. So with 10 years of experience, etc. So let me come in here and let me come in and let me just verify what I do section. I'm just going to add an H2. Okay, and let's reload. Okay, again, the color seems to be off. Let's verify that we're getting the right color. So in this case, the color just seems to be black or 000. Yeah. So I'm just going to grab the color 000. Ideally, although this could have been a mistake on the part of the designer, we do not mix too many colors on a web page. So my guess is that the designer may have intended to use the same color 190D37 for this H2 as well, but they probably just forgot to set it on Figma because these both look very dark. But in this case, I'm just going to go with the design, whatever is on the design. Let's just replicate that. But that is a question that I might ask the designer. And by the way, you can leave comments on Figma to ask questions, or you can just check in with the designer directly. Okay, so now we have the H2 that is looking fine too. What else? Well, we have this body text over here that is already enter. We have verified that. So let's maybe add this body text in as well. So, but the color also has been set for the body text. No. But this is not body text exactly. This is the body text, and this we have made enter. This is like headline text of some kind. So this is big text. So what I'm going to do is I am going to set up a class for this, and I'm going to apply those color and font settings to a class over here. Okay. So let me just grab this, and let me grab this color, and let me just call this class headline. So whenever I need to use, or let me just call it big text, maybe even headline may not be the right thing. So for big text, the background or the color that we want to use is this. And what is the font size? Let's study the font size here. So the font is Poppins, the weight is 400, the size is 18, and then the line height is 32 pixels. So let me grab that and let me put that in here as well. Yeah. And now we have the font size for big text. And if I want to verify if this big text is going to show up properly, I can just copy this content over here, and I can come into index.html under the h1. Let me add a div, and let me just give it the class big text, and let me just paste the content here. Okay. And I can verify that, okay, this looks more or less like what we have here, lorem ipsum dollars. Yeah, it looks to be, it's definitely bigger than the normal body text. Okay. I think we have set up most of the basic styles at this point. There are maybe there is this one style and there is this one style here that we may need to deal with. Let's deal with them when we get to them. But at this point, I'm feeling pretty good in terms of the background of the page. We've made a lot of progress. We've brought in all the fonts. We brought in the inter font, of course, and we may want to give it like a backup font in case the font is not picked up properly. Then similarly, we may want to give a backup font to Leak Spartan as well. I'm just going to put sans serif here. So whenever you're putting in font families, it's always a good idea to also provide backup fonts. And let me also provide a backup font here. And let me provide a backup font here for Poppins as well. Okay, great. So that is going to make sure that our fonts load up properly, and we've provided the right backups. Fine. Next up, let us actually start building the web page section by section, because we've set up the basic styles: header, body, font family, text size, background, etc. So let us add the content for each section one by one, first using HTML, and then let us check the CSS properties for that content, and then finally let us add styles for each completed section one by one using CSS. So we are going to go section by section. So I'm going to start with the hero section or the top section, and I'm going to start by adding the content. So what do we have here? Well, there is this, the way you should approach these is you should go outside in. So this entire hero section here seems to be a box, right? And then in this box, let me actually just copy this over to a whiteboard so that I can actually show you how I would think about something like this. Okay, so here is the design we have. So here's the design we have, and now we're going to start annotating or start drawing boxes around this design. Now in this design, we have, first of all, of course, this entire thing is in a box, right? So this is our entire outer div, so to speak. Now up in this div, there are two parts. There is a left half and there is a right half. So this is the left half, clearly. This is where a lot of the content lives. And then this is the right half. This is where we just have an image. Okay. So now you're already getting a sense that you need an outer div, and inside that you need two divs. You need the left div and you need the right div. Now in the left div, we can start again breaking things up. So what you want to do is you always want to see, okay, are things arranged horizontally or are things arranged vertically? So clearly first in the outer box, things were arranged horizontally. So that will inform our CSS settings. Then, but in this left half, things are definitely arranged vertically. So there seems to be this one box that I can draw around this contact information. Then there is this one box that I can draw around this hi section. And then there is this one box that I can draw around this section, which is just the headline, or the sort of the big text. And then there is this one box that I can draw around this big text, which is the body text, which is big in size. And finally, there's one box I can draw around the contact me button. Okay. So at this point, we actually have a very clear structure of the page, and we can now start turning that into HTML content. All right. And I'm going to start giving some of these boxes IDs just for easy identification. But another thing that you can also do is you can just use HTML comments. So let's do both maybe. Okay. So first, let's just add an HTML comment here. And let's say this is the hero section. All right. Now in the hero section, I'm going to get rid of all of this for a second. I'm going to add it back later with time. In the hero section, we have two boxes. So you always want to do the design outside in. So in the hero section, we have one box, and this box is going to be the hero text parts. And then this box is going to be hero image. Okay. All right. And now inside the hero text, let's go back here. So inside the hero text, we have a bunch of vertical divs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let me just add those in as well, just so that we have set up the structure before we are actually adding a lot of the content. So this is going to be, let's see. So this is going to be email and phone. And let's just put that in here or we'll write that in here as well. Then after email and phone, we have hi. We have the name basically. After the name, we have this. Let me just call this like H1. So the H1 is going to be here. I'm going to create a div right now, but maybe later I might just replace that with a direct H1 tag. And then we have this explanation or this, let's call this subtitle, or let me call it title and subtitle, and then a button, right? So let's call this title, and let's call this subtitle. Okay, and then finally let's add a button. So there's going to be a button here. All right, so now we've set up the basic layout. We've set up we've set up an outer div called hero, in which we have the hero text div, we have the hero image div, and then in the hero text div, we have a bunch of divs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divs for each of the sections within that section. Okay, so let's see. The first thing we need to do is, if I just reload the page, let me save this and reload the page. So right now we have nothing here, right? Right now we have nothing in the hero section. So the first thing we need to do is maybe start putting in some content so that we can start getting a sense of where things are, right? So this is the, maybe the first thing I'll do is I will put in the email and phone. So let me get the let me get the phone information. I'm going to just go in here. I'm going to copy the phone information, and let me put in the email and phone here. So let me just put that in right now. Okay, so now we have the phone. Then below the phone, we have this text, hi, I'm Fardi Sahin. So let me just copy in the text Fardi Sahin. I'll put the email shortly as well. I'll put in the email right now too. Let me just go in here. We'll figure out how to add the icon first. So the idea with any kind of web design is do the easy parts first and figure out the hard parts later. So, okay, now we've added the phone, we've added the email. I hope you can see here. I'll just zoom in for a second again. And then I've added that, hi, I'm Fardi Sahin. I've added that part as well. Then let's add in this content as well, which is the freelance front-end web developer and WordPress developer. So this is an H1. So I'm just going to add this in as an H1 directly. Okay. All right, so now we got the H1 here in here as well. And then let us get this subtitle. So which is going to be, I believe it is of the class big text. So let me just give it the class big text and paste the content. Okay. And now we have the class big text. So now we have the content starting to shape up. So we have the email and phone. We have hi, I'm Ferdi Sahin, which is just body text, normal body text. We have freelance front-end developer. We have this, and we have this button here. So let's add in this button here as well. And so we have this button, and this button is called contact me. Let's put that in a div. Okay, so there's a contact me button. Perfect. All right. Now there is this image, this hero image over here. Let's come and get this. Let's grab this hero image as well. So we have already downloaded this image. If I show you here, we have this hero image that has been downloaded already. So I can go in and I can just import or use this image using the img tag. So img src equals hero image.png. And let me just, for now, let me just give it a height so that it's not too big, but we'll adjust the styles later. So let me give it a height of 240, and we'll adjust specific styles later. So hero-image.png. Yeah, there it is. So now we have the image here as well. Okay, perfect. So now we are getting to a point where for the first section, we have all the content. Now the next step is to maybe start aligning things a little bit, right? And of course, you can go back and forth with this. You can add a little bit of content, do a little bit of alignment, then add a little bit of content, do a little bit of an alignment. But just to keep things simple, for now, I'm adding the entire section content, and then I'm going to style it. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to show these two divs horizontally, and we want to maybe make them both take up 50% of the screen area, right? So to make things horizontal, and you can always look this up, you can always say how to show two divs horizontally, but let me just give this a class, or let me give this div an ID called hero section. And into the hero section, I'm going to go into styles.css. So for the hero section, I am going to say display flex. So this is a quick trick that I want to tell you. Anytime you want to show the children of a div horizontally, just set display flex. Okay. And just as I do that, nothing seems to happen, because inside it, we have these two divs, and we want both of those inner divs to be taking up 50% of the space, right? So let me just give them some IDs as well. So let me give this an ID hero text, and let me give this an ID hero image wrapper, because it's not exactly the image tag itself. This is a wrapper around the image. So hero text, let's give that a width of 50%. So it takes up 50% of the parent's width. And then we have the hero image wrapper. Let's give that a width of 50% as well. Okay. And let's see what happens. Okay. Nothing seems to have happened, which is strange. So these are the issues you run into when you are doing things live. So at this point, the way I'll debug this is I will just right click here. I will check inspect, and let's zoom this out a little bit. And I am going to then, I'm going to then maybe just check whether the div actually was added properly or not. So we have the hero section div, and the styles don't seem to have been applied. Why was the style not applied? Hero section. Oh, yeah. So the styles were not applied because I have to select by ID. So let me just make that hash instead of dot. Okay. And let's reload the page. And now you can see already that both of these seem to be taking up. So this is the hero text section, and this is the hero image section. Both of these seem to be taking up about 50% of the space. Now, of course, this image itself is not taking up the entire space. So I might want to come into the image here, and maybe let's just put the image. Let's get rid of this div, and let's just give the image an ID, and let's just call it hero image. And this is one question that you'll ask yourself a lot. When should I be using a div? When should I not be using a div? The answer is whatever does the job, but you can start with something and then modify it as you need. So let's just give the hero image a width of 50%. Okay, so now the hero image has a width of 50%. That's fine, but that is not fully doing the job for us. So I think I'll just revert to the old style, and then I'll just apply some styles to the outer hero image. So let me go in here. Let me remove the, oh, that's because I had the height. So let me add the ID hero image here. So I'll keep my hero image wrapper at width 50%. And now I'll go into my hero image and I will give it width 100%. So it's going to take up 100% of the parent's width. Okay. So now the hero image should be taking up about 100% of the parent's width, which it seems to be doing. However, you can see that this parent itself, this entire thing is kind of spreading across the page, which we may not want. We may want to just put a maximum width to this entire section. And I think the maximum width that we are putting here is about 1440 pixels. So let me just set the entire maximum width for the hero section to 1440px. And let me set the margin to 0 auto so that things always remain centered on the page. Okay. All right. So now it's looking a little better. So now we have this page, and on this page we have on the right we have this hero image, on the left we have this content, and we can verify that both of them are taking up 50% of the space. So here we have the hero section. Within the hero section, the hero text seems to be taking about 50%. The hero image wrapper seems to be about 50% of the width. Yep, great. So now we are getting very close to completing our hero section styles. I can see that there is a small padding or the small spacing here at the top somewhere. So that's probably spacing on the body. So I may need to reset the margin to 0 and the padding to 0 on the body to get rid of that top spacing. Okay, that top spacing is now gone. Perfect. Great. Now let's fix this side. Let's fix the left side of things. The right side seems to be fine. So let me just bring this back here into half size. And let's start actually adding content into this particular section over here. So I can see here that this seems to be about 33 pixels below the top. So there seems to be like a padding of 32 pixels. I'm just going to guess about 32 pixels. So I'm going to come into the hero text. And I'm going to add a padding of 32 pixels on the top, 0 pixels for now on the right, 32 pixels on the bottom, and 0 pixels on the left. Okay. And let's do that. So now we've added some padding. So things are looking a little bit better. So that's great. Yeah. So now we've added padding. That's good. What next? Well, let's start fixing things one by one. Maybe we need some left and right padding as well. Let's see what left and right padding we can add. So here there seems to be about a 20 pixel space between the text here and the image here. I would probably take a similar 20 pixel padding on the left as well. So I'm just going to make this 20px. So these are places where often you may not be able to get exact details from Figma, and you may either have to guess or you may simply have to ask the designer. Okay, great. So now we have padding. So now things are looking a little nicer. Then let's start fixing one by one things starting from the top. Now let's separate out. So here we have the phone number on the left and the email on the right. So let's separate those out. One very simple way to do this when you have one thing on the left and one thing on the right is to just use a float. So you could say div style equals float right. And again, this doesn't always work depending on the complexity of the situation. But if you want to do a very simple thing where you want one thing on the left, one thing on the right, that's what you can do. Just use float. So that's fine. Now we have added that information as well. And let's check the font size here. So the font size seems to be small and the font seems to be Roboto. Again, a fourth font. This seems like too many fonts on the page. So I'm just going to use the font Inter for now instead of Roboto because I don't want to import another font. And I may need to check with the designer why they have so many fonts because 2 to 3 fonts on a page is generally sufficient. But let us come in here. Let us give this And let us give this a class, or let's give this an ID because there's only going to be one of these. Or let us just give it a class called small text, and we'll use it elsewhere as well. Small text. Okay. And now we will just pick dot small text, and let us set the font family to Inter. I'm not going to use Roboto here. And sans serif. Font, okay, line height, etc. All that is fine. And I may need to check the color as well. Maybe there might be some change required in the color. But now it is smaller. So it's definitely what we are going for, slightly smaller than what we have. Okay, the color seems to be just black. So 000. So I'm just going to set the color to, it copies as background, but it should actually be color. Okay. So yeah, so now the color is fixed and this is all good. Then we have this next section, and there seems to be about a 52 pixels of gap. Normally these gaps should be multiples of 4, and like 4, 16, 32, 48, but 52 seems to be what they're using here. So I'll just use 52 as per the design. So let me go in here, and this is like, let me give this the, or let me give this a small, let me give this an ID, and let's give it the ID name, or like hi and name. So always coming up with good names is always hard, but always try to give a descriptive name so that when you're just browsing through the CSS file, you know exactly what you are referring to. So hi and name, right? Hi and name has a margin top of 52px. So let me add that. So now you should see here that there is a margin top of 52px. All right, so this is good. Then let's also maybe check over here what's going on. So there seems to be too much gap here. The gap here is only 10 pixels. We may need, somehow this gap seems to be higher than 10 pixels. So I'm just going to check here. Okay, looks like this is the default. This is the default padding or the default margin for H1. And right now the margin, the default margin for H1 seems to be set to about 32. But the default margin that we want is 10 pixels. So I'm just going to set this to margin top 10px. And let me reload that. By the way, I'm using the inspect element browser tools. This is something that you'll often have to do. Okay, no, sorry, that's not for H1. That's for, that's not for HTML, that's for H1. Margin top 10px. Perfect. Great, this is looking fine too. Hi, I'm Fardi Sahin, a freelance front-end developer and WordPress developer. What next? Lorem ipsum del. Okay, this again, the gap here seems to be 30. It's currently 32. Let's change the margin bottom as well to 30px to match the design exactly. Okay, looks fine. I think we have probably fixed the margin here. And we can always verify by going into inspect element. So we go into inspect element, check the computed settings. You can check that, okay, margin bottom seems to be 32 still. Oh, I've not saved it. Yeah. So now it's a little closer. It's a little better. So this is what you do. You look at the design, then you come into your HTML file and add some CSS properties. Then you go and inspect to make sure that things are exactly as you want them to be. All right. So that's fine. What next? Well, we have this contact button. Let's try and fix the color and the font, etc. for this button. Okay, so the background color seems to be 2F, 2F, 2F. So that's what I'm going to use for the background. And then the width and height also seem to be provided here. So width is 44. Let's just copy them all. And let me come back here and let's go into the button here. And let's give this button a ID. Let's call it contact button. Let's come in here back into, and let's paste in all the properties. So we are adding a height, we are adding a width, we are adding a left. I don't think we need this left and top, generally speaking, because we are already arranging things in the right order. So we won't need that. So that's why be wary of copying things directly from Figma. Sometimes you might get weird results. But width and height is something that I can use, and I can add a background. So let me grab the background color as well. So let's see background color. 2F, 2F, 2F seems to be the color that we are using. And looks like the text color also needs to be changed. So the text color in this case, or the text size is 16 pixels. The line height is 19. Let me just grab that and put that in here. Font family inter, font size is, font weight is 500, line height is 19, font size is 16 pixels. Okay. And there's a text color as well. The text color just seems to be white. FF. So color is just going to be Ken. All right. And there is some space above this. So there's about 20 pixels of space above it. So I'm just going to say margin top 20 pixels. All right. Okay. So our hero section is looking good. Now I'm not going to get into responsive design in this particular tutorial, because now you may ask, okay, how does it look like on mobile, etc. But at the very least, if I compare it to what I have here, I think this is looking fairly similar. Hi, I'm Ferdi Sahin, freelance front-end web developer, WordPress web developer, a subtitle, and then a contact me button. And clicking on the button may probably open an email or something like that. So let's actually just make the button functional. Instead of the button, I'm just going to use an A tag, and I'm going to put in a mail to link so that clicking on it will open up a mail. And mail to ferdisahin@mail.com. So let me just grab that. And let me put that in here. And let's just say target equals _ blank. Okay, so that's going to open a email thing. And I think we don't need this div at this point. So whenever you feel that a div is not necessary, you can always just go ahead and delete that div. Let's come back and let us change that to /A, and let us just format the document and save it. Okay, that's not doing it. Well, I think A tags, you might also need to set display block for A tags in case you want to add margin and padding. Okay, that's still not doing it. I'm just gonna keep it to a button for now. Let's forget that. Right, so you have to sometimes make these decisions, what should be which kind of a tag. In most likelihood, you will probably be just using a framework that will take care of these things for you. But for now, I think let's just keep this button, which is not exactly functional. So with that, we are more or less done with the hero section. You might notice that in the hero section, our content here, our image actually goes all the way to the right, but the text does not go all the way to the left. So we may need to fix that. So that is what I mean by saying do the easy parts first. What you might want to do is implement the entire page and then figure out exactly how you're going to implement this behavior, because you also have to think about what happens when you resize the page and all. In this case, for now, I'm just going to keep things equal width for now, and I'm going to come back and maybe fix it later when I have the time. Okay. Or I'm going to go back to the designer and say, hey, this design looks a little odd because over here it kind of goes all the way till the end, over here it doesn't. How about we keep it centered on the page? Right? How about we make sure that all the content is centered on the page so that we don't run into these issues? Okay, so that is the hero section. There's also this thing here in the background. I'm not sure how exactly we can implement something like this. Let's see, in the background we have this ellipse of some kind. Okay, we'll have to figure out how to add this glow. It may not even be that easily possible, and we'll have to figure out how to add this image. And again, that is something that we can possibly look at towards the end or something. Okay, cool. Well, I think we'll do one more section, because we can, of course, as we keep doing this, it's going to take a lot of time. So how about we do one more section? Let's do the pricing section, and I leave the other sections to you as an exercise. So let me come back here. And let me get rid of these other sections. So I have this what I do section that is left as an exercise. I'm getting rid of that. By the way, you can comment out an entire section like this. So just start with exclamation mark hyphen hyphen and close with hyphen hyphen exclamation mark, and then that way you can comment out an entire section. So let me do that, and let me do that with projects as well. Let me just comment that out for now. I'm going to implement the pricing section. Let me comment out the questions and the footer as well. Okay, and let's go ahead and now let's start implementing the pricing section. So this is the pricing section. And in this pricing section, we have like the small thing here, this blue thing called pricing. And we have like a subtitle or a heading, H2. Then we have this subtitle. And then we have a bunch of these boxes. So let's see. Let's again go step by step. Let us first take this and create a box around it. Okay. And let's come back here into our a drawing tool. And let's draw some boxes. So in this case, there is obviously this big box right here. That's what everything is under. In this big box, I can see that the direction of elements is downwards, coming down. So there's definitely this one div here at the top, which is the pricing. And then there is this other thing here. And then there is this other thing here. So there are three things. Pricing, you can take a look at the pricing table based on the work I do, and then you have that subtitle. And then there is this box that I can draw. So always try to draw full boxes in that direction. All right. So in the downward direction in the outer div, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes. So let's try and achieve this for now, and then we'll go inside this inner box later. Okay. So I am going to come back now and let's start adding some of this content. So in the pricing section, I just think I need this, the direction is vertical, so I don't need to do display flex or anything like that. Let me just add a div here and let's just type out the word pricing. Let's add another div here. Actually, this seems to be an H2, so we can just use an H2 here probably. So H2, and let's grab this content, which is, you can take a look at what I do, etc. So let us just copy and let us paste this content. Okay, things are starting to take shape. We will come back and fix things a little further. Then we have this lorem ipsum dollar cell. Okay, this seems to be the description, like a subtitle. I think this seems to be the big text. It's about, let's see, it's 18 pixels. So this seems to be the big text, the same kind of big text that we have here. So I'm going to create a div. I'm going to give it a class of big text. And I am going to paste in this content here. Okay. All right. So now we have pricing. We have this header. We have this big text. And finally, we have this actual pricing boxes. So for now, I'm just going to create a div and I'm going to say pricing boxes. All right. So that's everything that we need to put into the pricing section for now. Now, let's start fixing the style one by one. The first thing is that you can see that the pricing section is also centered. It's centered on the page. And yeah, so I'm just going to give it a maximum width as well. So I'm just going to go into the pricing section. I'm going to say ID equals pricing section. And what is the ID of the pricing? What happens in the pricing section? So it seems like it is 190 pixels out from this side. And it is about 190 pixels out from this side as well. So 190, the total width is 1440. So out of 1440 pixels, it is we are subtracting 190. 1440 minus 190 minus 190. That is 1060 pixels. So the width of this, or the max width of the pricing section, is 1060. Max width is 1060 px. And I'm also going to set margin to 0 and auto. Margin 0 auto basically says top and bottom margin is 0 and left and right margin is auto, which means that you want to compress things into the center. And let's come in here and let's just reload the page. And you can now see that it is centered on the page. So it's slightly better than what we had earlier. Okay. Then we have this thing here called pricing over here. It's a very small thing. It's in blue color. And then we have the same thing later called questions. So let me just call this over title because it's showing up over the title. So let's just call this over title and let us grab its styles. So I'm going to create a class called over title. And let me paste the styles here. So left and top are not required. We don't need a border radius. So height is 49 pixels. Width is, no, we don't need a height and width either. I think we just need the text styles. So let's get the text typography style. So we are using Poppins and 12 pixels and line height of 18 pixels. And we don't need these letter styles. So you have to be careful about which CSS styles you bring in from Figma. You use it as a reference, but don't use it as the ground truth essentially. Okay, and then let's add that over title to this pricing section. So div class equals over title. Okay. And it seems like it's all uppercase. So let me just make it pricing. Actually, we can do it in, I think it's called text decoration. So let me see, CSS uppercase. You can use the text transform property. So I'm going to use the text transform uppercase. Okay. And I'm going to put in the right color as well, which seems to be 2858 FF. So color is 2858 FF. Okay. So now we have the right price. Now we have the right color. I think we need to add a text align center as well, so that this is centered on the page. Okay, great. So now this is centered on the page too. Perfect. And finally, I think this is it. But finally, one other thing we have to note here is that there seems to be a significant amount of gap between sections. So I'll have to estimate this. I don't see any direct way of, yeah, there it is. Well, 98 pixels seems to be the gap between the pricing section and the, yeah, 98 pixels seems to be the vertical gap. So maybe what we can do is within the pricing section itself, we can add that, let's say each section can have a 40 pixels and a 40 pixels up and down gap, and we can fix the exact things later. So in the pricing section, I am just going to say, well, it's 98, right? So let me make it 48 pixels. So let's see, pricing section, I'm going to say margin top and bottom to be 48 pixels, right? And I'm also going to add a margin bottom for the hero section, 0 auto, 48 pixels auto, so that between two sections we have this 98 pixels of gap. All right, so this is looking fine. Now we need to fix this H2. So we have this H2. Seems like there is a maximum width. So we are setting a max width of 700 pixels for this. So let's set a max width of 700 pixels for this H2. Let us also set maybe text align center. So in this specific case, I am going to say, I'm going to give it a heading. I'm going to give it a ID or give it a class called section heading. And I'm going to come in because there may be other H2s which may not be section headings, and or dot section heading. And I'm going to say text align center. I'm going to say max width, let's see, 700 pixels. So max width 700 px. I'm going to say margin 0 auto, so that it becomes centered on the page. So whenever you want to center something within its parent, horizontally speaking, just give it margin 0 auto. And sometimes the 0 may be different because you may want a upper and lower margin to be different. And I think the margin is not exactly 0, but it's 8 pixels. So for the over title, let me add a margin bottom of 8 pixels. Okay. So let's do that. And now you can see suddenly that we now have this pricing section, and you can take a look at the pricing table based on the work I do. So this is good. Now we have the section as well. Let's finally fix this too. So this seems to be the pricing or the section subtitle essentially. So let's add a class called section subtitle. Section subtitle, and let us again give it text align center. Let us give it margin 0 auto. Let us give it, what is the max width here? Max width seems to be 686, about 700. Let's give it max width of 700 px. And finally, and there seems to be definitely a 8 pixel gap. So it's not exactly 0 auto, it's 8 pixels above. And for now, let me give 0 pixels. Let's check the bottom distance as well. So let's see, 48 pixels below, right? So 8 pixels above, 48 pixels below, and then auto. All right. So with that, and text align center as well. Oh, we need to add the section subtitle. So we can add a second class here, section subtitle. So this is how you add multiple classes. You can add not just one class, but you can add multiple classes to a div. So we have big text and we have section subtitle. So big text is going to ensure that it gets this font size and it gets this color. And section subtitle is going to ensure that it is centered on the page as we might expect, right? So now you can see now we have this pricing section, and in this pricing section we have the title. In this pricing section we have this, and we have this content as well. Okay, great. So things are looking good. Let's finally go ahead and maybe try to also add the pricing boxes. I think if we can add one box, we should be able to add all the boxes. So let's come back here and there are 3 pricing boxes. So let's create 3 divs. So let's call it pricing box 1 and div box 2 and div box 3. Okay. And now into this div, let me give this a ID pricing boxes. Okay, I've given it a ID pricing boxes. So I'm going to come back into my styles file, and for the pricing boxes div, I'm going to say display flex. Okay, we want to flex. We want the children of this div to be horizontal. So display flex, and let me give all of these a class pricing box so that I can set each of their widths to 33%. Let's see, class equals pricing box, and let's add that to all of them. You can also use advanced flexbox properties to do this, but for now I'm just going to use something very simple. And I'm going to set for width of 33% for a pricing box. Okay, and yeah. So now you can see that we have at the very bottom, we have box 1, box 2, and box 3. Okay, I forgot to add the class here. It added it in the wrong place. Yeah, so now we have box 1, box 2, box 3 at the bottom of the page. I'm just going to add a small div with a large height at the end, just so that we can bring up some of these pricing boxes. So I'm just going to give it style equals height 600px. This is just to add another div at the bottom so that I can scroll this up a little bit while developing. Okay, so now we want to create these boxes. So what do we want to do in these boxes? Let's see one by one what we are going to do in these boxes. By the way, you can see here pricing boxes, we may also need to add a little bit of a padding so that it's not sticking to the corner, but we'll figure it out. Okay, so coming back here to the design, what we've already done is we figured out that we need a horizontal layout here. That's why we use display flex. And then we have these 3 boxes. Each box seems to have equal. Yeah, each box seems to have equal width. We've done that with 33% width. Now in a particular box, the layout seems to be vertical. Okay, so we have a bunch of these, and in the vertical layout, if I start drawing boxes, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 boxes. Okay, so one is this PSD to HTML, which is the service. One is the price. Then one is the description. One is the these are, let's say, benefits, and a contact button, right? So let's do that, and let's start adding all of these. So in the pricing box 1, I'm just going to do one box, and let's see if we can maybe just copy paste and use similar styles wherever possible. So I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to give it the class service. And what is the service here? So the service here is PSD to HTML. So let's just say PSD or PST to HTML. So that is the service that is offered in the first pricing box. Then I'm going to have another div here. I'm going to give it the class price. So the price for the first service is $99, $99 per page. We'll fix the styling later. Then let's add the description. So let's say class service description. So it's good to be a little specific with class names because description is a very generic class name that may apply to a lot of things. So let's copy that content. Let's put that in content in here. Service description. Then let's go in and let's call these service benefits. So this is a list. So I'm just going to create a single div for this. Let's give it the class service benefits. Okay. And let's just put service benefits here. And finally, there is this service contact button, right? So let's put in a button here. And let's just say service contact. All right, so now we have some content here. And of course, this is not looking exactly how we want. But now for the first box, we have some content in place. Now let's start actually laying out the box. So this box by itself seems to have a white background. So let's do that. And the different boxes have different backgrounds. So maybe background is not something that we want to set. Well, let's set it. Let's set on pricing box itself. Let's set the background, and if required later, we can change it. So pricing box should have the background or background color white. I've added the background color of white for pricing box. So now you can see that each pricing box has the background color white. Oh, the third one is not given the right. Yeah. So these pricing boxes have the background white, but they seem to be touching. We don't want them to touch. We actually want a 20 pixel gap between them, or maybe a 10 pixel gap around the box. So here's a quick trick that I'm going to use. I'm going to create a new div called pricing card. So div class equals pricing card. And I'm going to put everything inside this card. Okay. So I'm going to keep the outer div just to determine the widths of each of the boxes. And I'm going to actually use a pricing card, which is going to have the margin, which is going to have the shadow and all of that. Okay. So instead of adding the background color on pricing box, let me add it on pricing card. And background color is okay, FF. And let me add a margin of 0 pixels at top and bottom. We don't need that. But left and right, let's get a 10px margin. Okay. So now the benefit that you get is that inside the pricing box, which determines simply the width, 30%, 30%, 33%, or let's actually just do that 33.33% just to be very accurate. And then we have this card. This card is going to be inside the box. It is going to have some margin around it. It is also going to have its rounded borders and all. So the radius, okay, the border radius seems to be about 10 pixels. So let's add a border radius 10px. Okay, now border radius has been added. Then it seems to also have a shadow. So there seems to be this drop shadow. I think we can just copy this drop shadow setting and paste it in here. Oh, so it seems to have a box shadow. So now you can see here that it has gotten its shadow as well. So that's good. Now we have a shadow. Then inside it seems to have about 20 pixels of padding inside it. You can see that all the content is padded by about 20 pixels. So let's add a padding all around of 20 pixels. Yep. So now we have a nice padding as well. And what you can do just for now is I can just copy over the same content into the other boxes as well, and we'll edit the content later. But the benefit of that will be we'll be able to see that how as we modify one particular class, that's going to apply to all of the different boxes at once. Okay. Yeah, so now we have, okay, now we have these pricing boxes, and these pricing boxes seem to be looking, at least on the outside, as we expect them. And now we can start modifying the service. The service, the class for the service is, let's see. So this is of probably the same class. No, it's a slightly different class, but seems like it has a, let's see, it has this font Poppins. So price service is the class. So for the class service, I'm going to add the font color or the font settings. Font family Poppins. Okay. Font size 14, line height is 21. Get rid of these two. Let's add maybe the color as well. Let's add the text transform uppercase. And let's add the color. I think it's the same color as the pricing section over title, which is this. So let's add the color here. Okay, so now the services are looking good. PSD to HTML, Sketch to HTML, Figma to HTML. Okay, well, I'm just going to edit those as well. So I'm just going to say, for box 2, I'm going to say Sketch to HTML. And here I'm going to say Figma to HTML. Yeah, so PSD to HTML, Sketch to HTML, Figma to HTML. 99 per page. Let's get the styles of 99. So the style here is Poppins, and line height is 54, size is 36, weight 700. So this is the price. So let's add the styles for price dot price. Okay, all of this looks good. Font size, line height, all of this looks fine. And the color seems to be just black. So I'm going to say color 00000. Okay, the color is fine too. Then, okay, this slash per page. So this information, I think this is something that we can put under a span probably. So I'm just going to put a span around this. Span, and I'm just going to give the span a class of price per. Okay, so let me just copy that and paste it in the other ones as well. Price, oops, let's copy this whole span. Or price per page, let's give it a class of price per page. And let's copy the entire span and let us put that span in each one. Okay, price per page. In fact, we should probably also have, the pricing seems to be same. Okay, so price per page, and then we have the span. So into the span, price per page, let's give the right colors. Price per page. And let's give it the color Poppins, font weight 14. Okay, all of this looks fine. And let's just add that. Let's reload the page. Okay. Price per page is the span. Oh, it's price per page. I think I made a mistake here in typing. Yep. And we need to change its color as well. The color seems to be 8A, 8A, 8A. So let me just change the color here as well. Okay, great. So now we have the price figured out. So price per page is done as well. Then we have this subtitle or this description essentially. So for this description, again, the font style seems to be Poppins, 14 pixels and 23 pixels. The same, I think it's exactly the same thing that we have here. So service description is exactly the same as the price per page. So service description. Yep. 8A is the color. No, the color seems to be slightly different. 8B, 8B. Normally, again, you don't use so many different colors. You have a fixed set of colors, but this particular design seems to have it. So let's just keep it that way. Let's make sure that there is enough gap. So there's a gap of 8 pixels above. In this case, that gap may not have existed. So let's add margin top 8px. And we've added a little bit of a gap as well as expected. And there seems to be a gap between these two too. So let us add that gap too. What is that gap? Let's see. 8 pixels between these two. So between the price and so let's add a margin top for price of 8 pixels. Yeah, so that looks a little nicer. That's again a little more spaced out. And then we have these benefits. All right. Now let me fix the benefits as a service benefit. So this is going to be a list. So I'm just going to create a list here in the first box, li, and in this li, I'm going to use ul to create an unordered list. And let's see how many benefits there are. Let's add those. Lorem ipsum 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the benefit in each case, the value seems to be the same. And so let's just create 6 copies of this. All right. Yep. Now, of course, I don't think we need this div specifically. I think we can just do this on the UL itself. So let's get rid of this outer div. Let's shift this back. And first of all, I think we don't need this margin here. So it's automatically getting indented. I think we don't need this indentation. So let's see how we can get rid of this indentation. Where is it? So it is, so there seems to be this padding, which we can get rid of. So service benefits. So I'm just simply inspecting it. I am then going into this, I'm selecting that particular div and then I'm just inspecting its styles and it has a certain padding. So let's set the padding to 0. Okay, so now it is moved left, definitely. But let's also set the list style to unstyled or unset or okay. UL how to remove bullet points. List style type none. Okay. So list style type none. Okay. Then we have this check mark here that we need to somehow figure out how to add. I am going to deal with this later. For now, I'm just going to maybe use an emoji. So let's just search check mark emoji. Yeah, and I'm just going to copy this emoji of over here, the check mark button. And I'm going to deal with this icons and stuff. These are things that can always be added later. So I'm just going to go in for now as a quick trick and I'm just going to add this emoji over here. Excuse me. Okay, so it's looking close. Let's add the color. Let's add the actual settings, which is, yeah, in the color seems to be, let's see, let me select some text. So the width, it seems to be again Poppins, but a bigger size and a slightly different color. So I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to put that under the font settings. So now font size is 16, font weight is 400, line height is 24 pixels. And I'm going to copy the color, which is 6666. So I'm going to say color 6666. Okay, yeah, and what is, I think this is looking exactly, no, this is not looking exactly the same. Seems like there is also an 8 pixel difference between each one. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say service benefits li margin bottom 8px. Yeah, and now it is a slightly more spread out. And yeah, looks fine to me. I think maybe all these settings can actually just be moved into the li itself, right? Okay, so it's looking pretty close. Weight, font weight 400, line height 24 pixels, and margin bottom of 8. And then finally there is this contact me button. So let's add that contact me button. So this is service contact button. Let's give it a class service contact button. All right, and it simply says contact me, right? I think it just says contact me. So let's go in here. Let's call this contact me. And let's come back and let's start styling this contact button. Okay, let's close this for now. So for the service contact button, first thing seems to be that there is the width is just full width. So I'm just going to set width 100% so that it takes up the entire width. Then there seems to be a height, or actually we can just figure out maybe what is the spacing that is there within. So there seems to be a 12 pixels padding at the top and bottom. So let me just put padding 12px all around just to, yeah, that looks roughly similar. Does it? Yeah. Or we can just set a height. That could be the other thing. We can just set the height for the entire thing. Let's see. The height is 44 pixels, so let's set a height. So often you'll have multiple ways of implementing this. I'm just going to set the height to 44 pixels. Yeah, I think it is about the same. Then there is the border radius. So border radius is 4px. Okay, great. Border radius has been set. I guess the border width can be set to 0 or maybe 1 pixel. Yeah, let's see what is the border width here. 2 pixels and 2f 2f 2f. So border is 2px solid hash 2f 2f 2f, that is the color. Then there's a background color. The background color in this case simply seems to be white. So we can just say background color FFF, which is just white. Okay, now we need to actually add some text colors. So the text color seems to be 2f 2f 2f. So let's add that text color. Okay, then let us add the text size, or the text seems to be inter, weight 500, 16, line height 19.36. Let's add all of that in here. So even though there are two different elements on Figma, when we are creating the button, it's just this one thing. All right, and that's it. Now, of course, we may want some sort of a hover state here. So you may want to say something like this, where when we hover over the service button, some of the things reverse. So when we hover over the service button, maybe the background color could become 2f 2f 2f. And the text color could become white. So that is F, 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 F. Or text color is just color, right? And maybe we also want to turn, let's see. I think this should do it, yeah. Maybe we also want to turn this cursor into a hand button. So you can say cursor pointer. This is again a common thing that you will often end up using. It turns into a hand button over here, right? So now you see, if I zoom in a little bit, so you see now we have this contact me button, and now we have these preferences. And now, of course, we can copy that over to the other ones as well. So let me just copy the service benefits and let me copy the contact me button. Let's copy it over to the second one. Let's copy it over to the third one. Okay. So now we have a pricing section that is more or less what we expect. So this is what the pricing section looks like here. And this is what the pricing section looks like here. Now, of course, the second pricing section, the sketch pricing section, seems to have a yellow background and a few other things. So that is something, again, we may have to figure out how to do. And I'll show you the quick way to do this. What you do is go into that second box in, yeah, so this is the, yeah, let's just add it. Let's add box 2 here. Box 2, pricing box, box 2. And into box 2, you can actually go in and add specific changes. So you can say dot pricing box dot box 2. So when it has both of these classes, in that case, we want the background to be yellow, which is just this color over here. So I can change the background color to that. Okay, that's probably not added to the right thing. I think it's pricing card that we need to add to. And let me just call it card 2 instead of box 2. So let's get rid of that. And I should be adding it on the second one. So this is the second pricing box. And in the second pricing box, let me add card -2. And now you can see that it is changed to yellow color. Let's quickly modify these styles as well. So here it is just sketch to HTML is just black. So I'm going to say that within, I don't need this. So I'm going to say that within card 2, if I have a service, then the color should be black. Let's reload that. So the color has become black. Then everything else looks fine to me. Maybe this may need some change. The color here is also black, but 75% black. So we can kind of copy that. So within card 2, if I am looking at a list item, or specifically if I have service benefits, or let's just do that. Within card 2, if I have a list item, then I want its color to be that. And I can just change the color for that list item. And similarly, I can change colors if required. So it's 50% here, 50% black here. So I can just copy this color and I can apply that to, what is this? Well, I believe this is service description and price per page. So within card 2, if I have a service description, then the color is that. So you just add this additional selector, and within card 2, if I have this price per page, its color should also be that. Right? And now we have, I believe we have the expected colors. You can see here that I can check that card 2 service description is the selector for it. What else? Well, we have this contact me is black and white, so it's the other way around. So within card 2, we have the only change is that background color and normal color are from the hover state. And within card, and of course this is for the contact button. So service contact button. And let's flip the styles for the hover state. So when we hover over it, we want it to be the other way around. So the color is going to be FFF. And the other color here is going to be 2F, 2F, 2F. Okay, service contact button. Well, that doesn't seem to have applied. We can just give that button a specific card or a specific. Yeah, we can just give that button a specific class here. So service contact button for card 2. Let's see. Card 2 button. So let's just do that. So we don't need this multiple selectors. We can just do card 2 selector. So depending on what you want to achieve, sometimes you may have to come up with like specific classes. But generally speaking, it's with a bit of experimentation, you should be able to figure it out. Oh, wait. I think I understand what the mistake I made. I did not put the word hover here. Yeah, that should do it. Card 2. Yep, that does it. So now we don't need this card 2 button class. So yeah, you'll often make these kind of silly mistakes when you are working on CSS, but this is looking good. So now we have this Ferdi Sahin, freelance web developer, pricing, and all of this is fine. Let's maybe add the footer as well, which should be very quick to add. So the footer is just this black band which contains, which is of height 58 pixels, or which basically has some text and it has like a 20 pixel padding internally. So let me just add the footer, and I think that will just complete the page for now. So let's go here, and let's give this the ID footer. And this footer has some text. The text is simply Fardi Saheen copyright. So let's go in, let's put in the text here. And let us just give it some styles. So let me come back into index.html. Oh, sorry, into styles.css. And let me go into footer. So the first thing with the footer is that it occupies the entire width of the page. So I'm just going to give it width 100%. Then I am also going to text align center. So I'm going to say text align center. I'm going to add a padding of 20 pixels, 20 px. So yeah, now we have that. We of course have to add a black background to it. So 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So let me add a background color 0, 0, 0. Okay, let us change the text color over here. I think I'm going to get rid of that additional div I had, or maybe reduced its height to just 100 pixels so that it's a little closer and you can see things more easily. Now we can just get rid of it completely. Yeah. Let's add maybe a margin top to it so that it's not too close to the content. So I think the margin top of 48 pixels should be fine. And let's change its color. So the color seems to be white. So let's add a color FF. The color of the page is footer is white. Let's grab the properties, the text properties. So the text properties just seem to be, the typography is just Poppins. So Poppins 12px, 18px. So let me just put that in here as well. Yep. And that's it. So now the footer has been added and the pricing has been added. And we have, I believe we've achieved what we wanted to set, what we set out to achieve, at least in terms of the adding the two sections. The only thing that I'm a little worried about is that this edge seems to be lining up with this edge over here, right? Which is not happening in our design. Our design is a little more spread out. And so maybe what we might want to do is we might want to restrict the width of this section also to match with this section. Let's see. So this is about what is the width of the pricing section. So we have this pricing section, and the pricing section, I believe, has a maximum width somewhere set. The pricing section has a maximum width of 700 pixels. No. It has a width of 1060 pixels. So maybe let's set the same maximum width for the hero section as well. Let's set the maximum width to 1060 pixels. So now everything is centered on the page. You have this pricing section which is centered, and then above it you have this section which is also centered, like that. Now this is something that you may want to discuss with the designer. In the design, you see the image actually sticks out a little bit, but there are two issues with this. If the image sticks out like this, what happens is that one, the content is no longer centered on the page properly, and second, what happens when you have a wider screen? Is the image still supposed to stick to the side? Probably not, right? Because if you have a really wide screen, it's not that you're going to, like, let's say the screen was this wide from this end to this end. You wouldn't want the image to just be so big that it sticks out or be somewhere in the corner. So what we have now feels like a reasonable middle ground to me. But of course, it's only the designer who can give the final answer here in terms of how they want the image to look. Right, so this is something that you may want to go back and discuss with the designer. One thing that I will do for this image is I'll probably give it a radius like this on this side as well, just to make it look a little nicer. So it has a radius of what? It has a radius of about 200. So let me just go in here and let me add that same radius for the image in my code as well. So I'm going to go to the hero image and I'm going to say border bottom right or border bottom radius . Okay, like that. So that's what I'm going with. And or the other option is that when I export the image, I don't export it with the radius at all. I just keep it blank. But I think this largely looks fine. Of course, the content is sticking out a little more than I would have hoped. So I may even reduce the width of the image slightly. So instead of going 50-50, I may go, let's say 60-40 with content and image. Okay. So this is where you may when you come to the implementation, often things don't work out exactly as a designer expects. So some things may need to be changed. Might be that maybe we can reduce like a little bit of the description so that we have one less line in the description. Let's see. So this is the subtitle, and in the subtitle, let me get rid of this entire section like that. Let me reduce a little bit of the top margin over here. So before the hi, I'm Ferdi Sahin, let me just change that to about 16 pixels, let's say, or 20 pixels. Okay. And that looks good. I think this page is looking fairly good. We have this phone, we have this email here, both of these pieces of information. We have this hi, freelance front-end developer and WordPress developer, a subtitle and a contact me button. Then we have this a little bit of a gap. We have pricing. You can take a look at what the pricing table based on the work I do. Then we have again some description. Then we have these 3 pricing sections. Then we have these contact buttons. And then finally at the bottom, we have this Ferdi saying copyright 2022, all rights reserved. So that's fine too. And maybe the only last thing that we may need to do is add these icons over here, this icon over here, and maybe also add these icons, these check mark icons that we have over here. So let's do that. And I think then with that, we'll close for the day. Of course, let's see if we can also incorporate this. But I'm just going to add this icon for now. So I am going to export this. So I can go into export and let me export this as a PNG file. Or I can also export it as an SVG file. SVG is good when you have to resize things. So let me export this as an SVG. And let me export this as phone.svg or phone. Then let me export this. And again, I'm going to export this as an SVG and export as email.svg. And finally, I'm also going to export this checkmark over here. So I'm just going to go and export that again as SVG as check.svg. Okay. Now we just need to incorporate or bring in these SVGs. So let's see, HTML include an SVG image. How to use SVG images in CSS? Well, looks like we can just do this. We can say img src and we should be fine. And we can give it a height and width. So what is the height here? 16 by 16, right? So I'm just going to do that I'm going to come into my text here and I'm going to come in before telephone number. So I'm just going to first create a span so that I have a span around the telephone number. And then I am going to create this img src equals phone.svg. And let me just set width and height directly here. Width equals 16, height equals 16. And let's say alt equals phone. We should always put an alt tag for an image. There you go. It's almost there, more or less. I think we probably don't need such a big thing. Maybe 10 by 10 might actually do it. Yeah, maybe 12 by 12. So that takes care of that for us. Yeah, I think that's what it looked like here as well, roughly. Right. Let's add the email. So let's again get this img here and we'll just change it to mail.svg or email.svg. Yeah, that's roughly what it looks like as well. You could say that, okay, maybe it is like shifted down a little bit. So we could do something like this. We could just give it like a small margin to adjust things a little bit. So what we could do, here's a quick trick. Anytime you want to center an image next to a page, you can, there are more complex ways to do it, but a very quick way to do it, I need to move the image down just a little bit. So you want to maintain the rest of the things as they are, but you just want to move the image down a little bit. You can say margin bottom minus 4px. Okay. What that does is that does not actually add any additional space. It simply shifts the image up or down. Okay, so negative margin is a very interesting thing, that it does not add additional space. It simply shifts the image left or right or up or down, as you say. And similarly, I'm also going to add a margin bottom minus 4px over here. So play with negative margins, but now you can see that things are all nicely lined up. And let's go in and add all of this here as well. So I'm just going to copy this img and I'm going to put it in the place of this tick mark over here. So I'm simply going to replace, well, let's do this. Let's do a find replace. So I want to replace the tick mark with this img tag over here. Let's first replace one, then we'll see if that is what we want to do for the rest as well, right? So let's put that in here. Let's get rid of this margin bottom. I think we may not need it. And let us just put check.svg. And let's reload the page. Okay, I think we may need a slight bottom margin to adjust it. So whenever you have icons next to text, margin bottom is your friend. So margin bottom and negative margin bottom in most cases. Minus 2px. Let's check that. Yeah, that looks fine. So now let's grab that and let's say that wherever we have this tick symbol or this tick emoji, I'm just going to replace them all with that. Okay, and I've replaced everything. And now you can see that my tick symbol is showing up as expected. Yep. I could even just, if I wanted to make sure that these width, height, and etc. and style margin bottom, if I don't want to repeat this everywhere, maybe another thing that I can do is instead of just repeating it like that, I can just create a class called .checkmark. And for .checkmark, I can say that I want margin, I want width to be 16px. Is that 16? Yeah, 16. I want height to be 16px. And I want the margin bottom to be minus 2px. And now I don't actually need to do this. I can, oh, the alt tag is also wrong. I probably don't need an alt tag here. I can just give it a class. Class equals check mark. Okay, and I can replace this. So I can now go back into the find and replace. And what I want to replace is this. And what I want to replace it with is this img src and class equals check mark. And let's replace them all. And we get exactly the same result, right? With, of course, this time we're using class, we are not repeating a bunch of styles. So in case we need to change the height of the check mark or something, let's say we want to change this to 20, we can do that very easily. Not that we have to, I think it looks fine. Okay, so I think this is a good place for us to stop. We have replicated the hero section closely enough. I personally did not agree with the design decision to extend the image outside of the center because that creates problems in centering and the content visually, and that also creates problems with larger screens. So instead what I went with is I simply centered the image or the entire content of the page here, and I have gone ahead and I've added this heading and of course reduce the sizes a little bit so that things probably fit in vertically. Then we added the pricing section. You can take a look at the pricing table, and in the pricing table we added all the specific sections. So I'm sure when you looked at it, the design may have seemed fairly complex, but as we just start approaching it step by step, as we break things down, identify, okay, what are the boxes looking like, and are the boxes arranged in a vertical direction or a horizontal direction, things become a lot easier. And then you just have to go element by element, make sure it has the right styles, and you can achieve any design, no matter how difficult it looks. And of course, there are cases where you need like custom shadows. You may need to overlap things on one another. Like let's say we wanted to do this. How exactly would we do that? Well, let's grab it. Let's maybe export it. Let's see what we can do with it. Let me again export this as an SVG file. And in an SVG file, let me just export it to line below, or let me just call it yellow line. Right? And let's see how exactly we can fit this. So we want this to show up right below the H2, right? So let me just show that, or right below the H1. So I'm just gonna come in here and I am going to say below the H1, I'm going to add this image img src equals yellow line.svg. And I am just going to give it the ID yellow line. Okay. So here's what that looks like right now. And again, I can use my margin trick. So hash yellow line. I can say margin top this time, and I can add a negative top margin minus 30 px. Let's see what that does. Yep, that's getting us close. Minus 40 px. Nope, doesn't do it. Minus 50 px. Okay, maybe I can put this yellow line inside the h1 tag, because the h1 tag has its own margin which I cannot get rid of. So let's come back here. Let's take that yellow line. Yeah, and let me put that inside. Yeah, that is better. That is better. But it's still not doing it. I think maybe minus 80 px. Still doesn't seem to be doing it. Well, what if we put this in a div? So this is where you'll have to experiment. This is where it becomes like a fairly tricky CSS kind of thing to do. And let's see if we can get img src id yellow line. Margin top is minus 80. What if we set margin top to minus 200 pixels? Still doesn't seem to be doing it. Okay, well, I think I'll just give up at this point. But maybe what we might need to do then is we might need to adjust some of these gaps, because now we no longer need this margin below the H1. So I can go back into H1 and I am going to remove the bottom margin, which is 30 pixels. Yep. Let's see now. Do we still have a bottom margin here? No. Oh, we do. And I'm just going to set margin bottom to 0. Yeah. So that is close enough. There are other styling properties that can be used to achieve exactly what we are looking for. You can use something called position absolute, I believe. Yeah, position relative and absolute, and then you can set exactly where it is from the top. That might be able to do it. Let me give it a quick attempt. Position absolute or position relative here. And here I'm going to give it position absolute. Okay, that is doing it. I probably don't need this. And yeah, now I can say margin top minus 10 px, probably like that. And if I want it to appear behind the text, I need to put the text as the next thing here, not the first thing. Well, or we could use something called z index. So again, z index is -10, let's say something like that, so that it shows up behind the text. Okay, this is good. Now we can probably add back that H1 padding that we had. So let's see, we had a margin bottom 30px. Yeah. So now this is almost exactly, okay, it's a little higher, the yellow line, instead of it being -10px, maybe we can go -15px. Yeah, and now it's almost exactly what we're looking for. We have WordPress developer and we have WordPress developer. So what you can do is you can have a position relative on the parent, position absolute on the child, and then you can move it around anywhere within the parent. Okay, so that's just something that you can do in case you need to achieve layouts like these. But otherwise, this is looking good. I think I'm going to stop here. There is a title section, there is an email section, and we can, of course, hyperlink this. We can hyperlink this. All of those things are possible. This is looking good. Freelance front-end web developer and WordPress developer, and this is looking fine. Contact me. Looks good. Pricing. The boxes with pricing, and then the layout. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show you how to deploy this in case you are going to share this with somebody. So here's what you can do. Just zip it up, go to compress, Figma to web page, just zip that up. And we're not going to use Git or anything here. I'm just going to use this free platform called static.app. Let me just sign out here so that I can show you. Yeah. And here static.app allows you to just take a zip file and you can upload that and deploy it. Inexpensive rabbit. Okay, let me just add Sydney plus 99 at jovian.com. Okay, and let's, yeah, so this is a site where you can upload a zip file and then you can just, you'll have to verify your email. Let me go ahead and do that right here. Doing it on another screen here. Okay, I'm going to activate my email. Done. And once my email is activated, it has taken the zip file and it has simply uploaded it on the cloud and it has given us this URL. It takes a minute or two to set up, but at this point, yeah, it is still unpacking the archive, looks like. Yeah. So at this point, our website is deployed. And you can also then connect static.app to your own personal domain. So I'm just going to share this link with you so that you can actually verify that this website is actually deployed. But this is all there is. You have a layout like this, which is given to you in Figma. The first thing that you do is inspect the design mockup. You identify, okay, what are the different dimensions, what are different components. And there's a guide here that you can check out, which an overview of Figma for developers and how developers can use Figma. But the idea is you just inspect the design, you identify what are the various sections, you identify the fonts used on the page, you find them on Google Fonts, you export any images or JPEG files that are being used within your web page. Then the next step 2, is to set up the basic page structure and styles. So you create a folder on your desktop and then you open it up in VS Code, or if you're using Git or something fancy like that, then you can do that too. Create an index.html file, create a styles.css file. That's what we have here. We have a index.html, we have a styles.css, and copy over all the images that you need. So the hero image was the only image, and then we had a bunch of these. Then you add the basic styles. So you add basic HTML tags, head, title, link, body. We added all of those first in our file. Then you add the various section-wise divs. So you create a div for each section because each section ultimately is going to be a box on the page. And you set up some basic styles for the body, you set up basic styles for the header, you set up backgrounds, font families, text sizes, colors, etc. Then you go ahead and you implement the web page section by section. And the key there is to first identify in the box whether the box is in whether things are arranged in a horizontal direction or a vertical direction. So you always want boxes, and the box has to have something in a vertical direction or something in a horizontal direction. And then you then create boxes within boxes, right? So you're always looking to create a layout like this, where you have, or a layout like this, where you have a box. And then within this box, one possibility is that you have boxes that are laid out horizontally like that. Or the other possibility is that you have a box, and within this box, things are laid out vertically, and so on. And then of course, again, within that horizontal box, you can have like a bunch of vertical boxes like that, right? And then within each of those vertical boxes, you can again have a bunch of horizontal boxes. So if you start thinking of your web design as something like this, as a bunch of boxes inside boxes inside boxes, with each box having its children laid out in horizontal or vertical order, then your web design becomes really simple, and you'll never run into a lot of the CSS issues that often plague web developers. So in this case, for the pricing table, we had a vertical layout first. So the box, 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 and then a big box. And then inside the big box at the bottom, we had a horizontal layout, box 1, box 2, box 3, equal width. That's where for horizontal layouts, you use display flex. And then for each of these inner pricing cards, we also used a trick where we added another inner div, which will have its own radius and border and all, so that the outer divs were just for creating the widths and the inner divs were creating the cards. And then in the pricing card, we have a horizontal, a vertical layout. Okay. So that's all you need to know. That's all you really need to know in terms of taking a web design and then converting it, taking a web design mockup and converting it into a web page. Of course, there are these special cases like this, where you have to figure out how you're going to add that. But the way you do it is by using some negative margins here and there, maybe using a position relative for the parent, absolute for the child. And you can always just search position, relative, absolute examples. And there are a bunch of tutorials on this. Like, nobody knows exactly how to do these things. You have to learn, you have to search for them. And position is generally one thing when you have like one thing behind another that you can deal with. So similarly, you can maybe get this one element, this nice glow that you have here. You can get this element somehow. You can try to get this element, this glowing thing. And you can export that ellipse as a PNG file or an SVG file. And let's see, yeah. And then you can just incorporate that within your code as well. Okay, all of that is doable. So yeah, so you add content for each section one by one using HTML by using that box structure. Then you use Figma's inspect tab. So remember here, you select anything and you can see exactly what properties it is using. It's not that you will be able to copy these over directly. You may have to make some changes to it. But you use Figma's inspect tab to check values of CSS properties, add styles for each completed section one by one using CSS, and then try to replicate the mockup as closely and as precisely as possible. And that's where we get into these minor details, like over here we have this @ character which is vertically centered. So maybe we can achieve the same thing over here like that. And often there may be some trade-offs we will have to make when you actually go ahead and implement the design. For example, we reduce some spacing here. We decided that we are going to center the image on the page and add a border to it, because otherwise it just looks a little odd that the image is not only sticking out, but it's also then there is some space on the right which is empty. Okay. So that is everything that we're going to cover today. So thank you for joining. And there are a bunch of first of all, I would love to know, how did you find the session? You can drop a line in the chat and we'll see. But there are a bunch of comments or questions as well. Let's see. How do we get the Figma file? We will add a link in the description, but let me also share that link with you right now. So this is the Figma file that you can use. Then you should use the button tag inside an A tag for mail. Yeah. Okay. So that was a nice tip, that I can actually put the button tag inside an A tag. So that's great. I will definitely do that. Or we can actually just fix that right now, I believe. It's okay. It's okay. We are out of time. Hover state is not added. Yeah. So we've added the hover state, not for this button. Yes, we should add it for this button also, but we've added the hover state for these buttons. Would you recommend to use live server so that you don't have to reload the website? Yeah, so you can use a VS Code extension like live server. So there is this VS Code extension called live server. You can use it if you're using VS Code on the cloud like GitHub Code Spaces, or you can also use it locally. And the benefit is that anytime you make a change to the file, it automatically reloads the page. So you can use that too. I just wanted to keep things simple for today. And yellow line rotated 45 degrees. Well, it's not rotated here, but yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, I think we will close at this point. So thanks a lot for joining. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And if you want more tutorials like this, come join our WhatsApp community. We'll drop a link in the chat. It's just jovian.com/WhatsApp. So you can join our WhatsApp community, and you'll get to know about more future events. We have events happening every week, more or less. You can also just go on jovian.com/events and learn more about these events. So yep, I hope that is helpful now, and I'll see you next time. Thank you and have a good day or good night. Bye-bye.